Now listen up, I'm gonna give you the exact steps that I went through to make enough money while I was in the military to retire and never work again in my life. These are 3 things that you have to get right if you're gonna get rich in the military. Number 1, saving money while in the military. Number 2, investing while in the military. And number 3, real estate while in the military. I'm in Hawaii and I'm visiting my friend Doug Nordman. Doug Nordman of themilitaryguy.com retired from the Navy 20 years ago. He retired with enough money saved up that he will never have to work again. So what has he done since he left the military? He travels, he visits his friends, and he surfs almost every day. Doug retired 20 years ago. I retired 5 months ago. What do we have in common? We both did the same things. Saved correctly, invested correctly, and handled real estate correctly. The number 1 skill that you need to master to get rich is saving money while in the military. The secret to having enough money when you retire is to grow the gap while you're in the military. And what do I mean by grow the gap? Think of this as cutting your expenses, and think of this as how much you earn. Well, you want to continue to cut expenses and continue to raise what you earn. You want to grow the gap. That is essentially spend less, make more. We'll first talk about spending less. Maybe you have a budget, maybe you don't, but what you're spending now, you find ways to cut that down. Now, what are the biggest expenses to tackle first? Number 1, housing, and number 2, cars. You don't want to spend too much on housing. Here's a good example. When I was in Monterey, California for 3 years, I got $2,300 a month to pay for my rent. That was BAH. How much did I spend on rent? I spent $1,300. I was pocketing $1,000 a month. I've written an in-depth article about how to cut expenses. It was featured in Business Insider. Check out the link in the description. Moving on. First half of growing the gap, spend less. Second half, make more. When it comes to spending less, there is a limit to how much you can trim expenses. You'll hit a bottom. The bottom is 0. But there is no limit to how much you can make. Now we're in the military. How are we gonna make more? Our salaries aren't that high. You've probably heard the term side hustle, side job, side business, part-time job, something for extra income. Spouse needs to work. I flipped houses part-time to make extra money. In college, me and my wife both took extra jobs to help pay off my student loans faster. Find ways to make more money. Do it. That's saving in the military. Now we turn to investing while in the military. The secret to riches in the military, you want to correctly contribute to your TSP and your IRA. And a very important point to remember is that you are allowed to contribute to both. The max for a TSP is $19,500 per year. The max for an IRA right now is $6,000. Now your spouse can also contribute to her IRA whether or not she works. So let's talk about the right way to invest. The best way I've seen to illustrate this is to discuss all the mistakes people make with investing. The first one is buying and selling stocks based on newsletter, news, hype, fear, what you think, what your friends think. All that is wrong. You do not buy and sell stocks based on what you read in the Wall Street Journal, based on what you read in the Motley Fool. Sorry, Motley Fool. Let's cover day trading real quick. Day trading is for losers. The only people making money in day trading are the ones selling the courses and books, so don't fall for it. Another big one I see right now, Bitcoin, Tesla, everything else that's overhyped right now. Anything that everybody is talking about and everybody is investing in, and it just seems like it's skyrocketing up, I got news for you. It's too late. By the time you jump in, you're likely to lose your shirt. The last one I'll talk about, and certainly not the least, timing the market. I'll use the COVID-19 pandemic as an example. March 2020, everybody in the United States is freaking out about the pandemic. Stock market starts dropping. There's no more toilet paper. We can't seem to buy enough ammo. What do people do? They sell all their stocks. The thinking is sell now, wait till it gets way down here, buy back in, and then ride that wave back up. Well, that rarely happens. In fact, that didn't happen with coronavirus. Those that sold lost lots of money when the stock took off again and never came back down. Those are the things not to do. So what should we do? Well, let me first talk about the people who invest on Wall Street and then Warren Buffett. All the people that invest on Wall Street, they work for those fancy firms and make millions and millions of dollars a year. They all have a goal. When they invest your money and everybody else's money, they want to beat the S&P 500 index. Now the S&P 500 index is a list of the 500 largest companies in the US, and generally when the market's up, the S&P 500's up. Over long periods like 10 years, 95% of investors, professional investors, don't beat the S&P 500 index. Make that 20 years, and the amount of people that beat it is microscopic. Now let's talk about Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett is probably the most successful investor ever. He has beat the S&P 500 index probably more than anybody else. He made the decision that when he dies, all his leftover money for his family, billions and billions, are not going to be invested by his company, but he wants to put them in the S&P 500 index and let it ride. For me to sum this all up, I'm essentially saying that if you invest your money in the S&P 500 index or a similar index, you're going to outperform 99% of professional investors. You've got so many places you can invest your money. You can put it in TSP, you can put it in an IRA, you can put it in a brokerage account, you can buy real estate. What should you do first? Here's the order of operations, the ideal way to invest your money to get rich in the military. Your first step will be TSP matching. If you have matching in your TSP, then you make sure to invest 5% of your income so that you can get a 5% match. We don't invest more than that because we just want the free money and then we want to invest in an IRA. Now, number 2 is invest in an IRA. I take IRA before TSP for a number of reasons. Number 1, it's easier to withdraw the money in an IRA. Number 2, there's more investment options in an IRA. The third one has to do with expenses. The expenses are essentially the same. TSP matching's first, then IRA to the max. Then after you've maxed your IRA, you max your TSP. Number 4 would be open a regular brokerage account, which means a non-retirement account, and invest in that. And number 5 would be invest in real estate. Now that's optional, but it's certainly something that I did and I talk a lot about. If this stuff is helpful, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications, and give me a thumbs up. Leave a comment and let me know what you think about all this. Now, why is it that investing in your retirement accounts is so key to becoming rich? Now that we've talked about the S&P 500 as a potential way to invest, I want to talk about the magic of contributing to your account over the long term. This applies to all your accounts together, TSP, IRA, and everything else you have invested. Let's say you invest in the S&P 500 index $1,000 a month, and you do that for a 30-year career. Now, the S&P 500 index has made more than 7% a year over the last 50 years. Let's just say 7% for now. If you make 7% on average over the long term and you invest $1,000 a month for 30 years, how much will you end up with? Well, here's a little chart. You will end up with more than $1.2 million on that $1,000 a month. Well, guess what? $1,000 a month is only about half of the max you're allowed to contribute into your retirement accounts. So let's say you maxed it, $2,000 a month. Duh, that's easy. You're gonna make double, $2.4 million in 30 years. Well, what if you and your spouse did that? $4.8 million. That's the magic, and that's just your retirement accounts. Now I wanna talk about the power of early contributions. Why do I bring this up? Right when you join the military and your pay isn't that high, and so it's hard to contribute the maximum. It's hard to contribute anything. Let me share with you the power of those early contributions. They're worth so much more than contributing money the last few years of your career. If you take $2,000 and contribute that your first month in the military and don't touch it and you wait 30 years, how much money do you have? Well, if it's S&P 500 index and you make 7% on average, that money will grow to more than $16,000. That's massive. Now let's take that same $2,000, instead of investing it now, let's invest it 20 years into our career. Nothing in the account. After 20 years, you contribute $2,000, and then you have 10 more years to retirement. So that $2,000 only has 10 years to grow instead of 30 years to grow. How much do you make? Well, that $2,000 only grew to a little over $4,000. With early contributions, you 8x'd your money, and with the late contributions, you only doubled it in 10 years. Find a way to invest early and you will be rich. Now we're going to talk specifically about TSP investing. Remember, this is only first if you have matching. Here's the odd thing about TSP. You can't just invest in an S&P 500 index fund or any other mutual fund you've heard of. You have to invest in the TSP family of funds. They're set up as letters, and each letter represents a certain type of mutual fund that you can get in a normal account or a normal IRA account. Now in the TSP, you can invest in the C fund just like I did, and that mimics the S&P 500 index. But there are several other options for how to invest. I go over some of the best ones in my most popular video about investing in the TSP. Check it out. You should see a little thing up here. Now we get to investing in IRAs. Now remember, if you don't have matching in your TSP, you want to max out your IRAs first. IRAs are different than TSP. The TSP is administered by one company and everybody uses a TSP website. For an IRA, you get to pick where you have it, just like you'd pick your own bank. And I'd recommend Vanguard, Charles Schwab, or Fidelity as being very good choices. They have very low expense ratios that are similar to what the TSP offers. Now remember, when you're investing in IRAs or TSPs, don't be buying and selling all the time. Don't jump in and out of the market. Don't try to time the market. Pick one strategy and stick with that for the long term, and you're gonna make the most money. Once you've got your matching, if available, then you've maxed out your IRA, then you've maxed out your TSP, and you're ready to keep going. Good for you. Open up a normal brokerage account. And what that means is you're opening up an account to invest in, but it's not in a retirement account. It's just a normal brokerage account. Now, if you've invested your money all these different ways and you're still ready to invest, that's when you can consider real estate investing. Number 3 on my list is real estate investing. Definitely my favorite, but it is optional. I told you about Doug Nordman. These are his surfboards up here. He reached financial independence or had enough money for the rest of his life before he left the military. He did that without relying on real estate for income. It is definitely doable with the previous steps I talked about. But if you choose, you can also invest in real estate. It's a way of diversifying, and it may even accelerate your growth. But you have to do it right. Now, when I talk about real estate in the military, there's something very important to understand. It's not just about investing in real estate correctly. It's also about avoiding making common mistakes that I see most military members make with real estate. Let me give you an example. Everybody's heard that story about that mythical person in the military who bought a house at every single assignment. And then when he finally retired, he had 10 houses and had a great income from those houses, and he was rich. I got news for you. That almost never happens. That person exists, but they're very, very rare. If you buy a house at every assignment, you are going to lose money. And I'm gonna tell you why. The 1% rule is simple. If a property is $100,000, it should rent for at least $1,000 or more. If it does, then it could make a good investment. Now, this becomes a problem in places like San Diego, Honolulu, Washington, D.C. If you spend $800,000 for a property, it is probably not going to rent for $8,000 a month. That's where people make mistakes. Now, the 50% rule. If your rent is $1,000 a month, they say that you'll spend approximately 50% of your rent on the expenses of running a property. So out of $1,000, half of that goes to expenses, and you haven't paid a mortgage yet. Now let's look at this whole thing with a real life example of a house in San Diego. And I see this all the time. Let's say somebody moves to San Diego, lives there 2 years for the military, leaves and rents out the property. They rent it out for $2,400 a month. Their mortgage is $2,200 a month. They tell everybody they're making $200 a month. That is crap. They're not making $200 a month. Remember the 50% rule. Half of that $2,400 is expenses. Now let's do some math. They rent it out for $2,400 a month, minus $1,200 in expenses, minus a $2,200 mortgage. How much do you make every month? Ouch, you lose $1,000 a month. This is very common. Now, if they would have considered the 1% rule before buying this property, they would have realized it's very unlikely it'll ever make money. Because if it cost them $600,000 to buy, and they're only renting it out for $2,400 a month, they're not coming anywhere near the 1% rule, and it's a bad investment. Now let's also talk about appreciation. People are gonna say, yeah, I'm losing money every month, but I'm gonna make up for it in appreciation. My buddy in Hawaii, he bought a house, and 3 years later, it was worth $100,000 more. That happens from time to time, but that's actually very rare. The truth about appreciation is, over the long term, houses appreciate at approximately 3 to 4%. Now you might have small periods where it appreciates 10 or 20 or 30%, but that evens out later when it flattens out or even drops. Don't count on appreciation. Make sure that property is going to make money. Now, why do I tell you all this about real estate? Simple. Don't buy a property in the military unless it will make money as a rental property when you move away. It needs to pass the 1% rule. It needs to make money considering the 50% rule. Some people will say 50% is way too high for expenses. That's fine. Try 30%. You're still going to lose a lot of money in San Diego, and there's no way your expenses are lower than 30%. So what should you do if you can't buy? Well, you rent or you live on base. Now, renting is a good idea. People think they're throwing away their money when they rent. It's not true. Consider buying a house. Buying is expensive with the transaction costs. Selling is also expensive with all the transaction costs. Commissions on both sides. then you got a negative cash flow every month. With all that crap in there, you're often better off renting. If you want to know more about this, see my video on buy versus rent. Now, which step out of these is the most important? You got saving, you got investing, you got real estate. Well, real estate is optional, so it's between saving and investing. Well, I'll tell you something. You can't invest and you can't put money in real estate unless you have money to do it. Saving money is the most important. Cutting expenses, raising your income, and growing that gap is the most important step in this process. This is Rich from Rich on Money. I hope you enjoyed this today. Here's some videos that I recommend. Check these out. And make sure you hit that thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Thank you very much. This is Rich on Money, heading out surfing and signing off.